Hi there, Alberto Savoia here, author of The Right It, Why So Many Ideas Fail and How to Make Sure Yours Succeed. And today I want to bring you hypozooming, a very, very powerful technique based on the very, very powerful concept of the XYZ hypothesis. Now, if you haven't watched my previous video in which I introduced the XYZ hypothesis, I recommend that you do it now because you pretty much need it to understand this video. So it's a powerful concept combined with the powerful technique of hypozooming that I described today. So as you remember, the XYZ hypothesis is a very effective, simple, but powerful way of expressing your idea using the following simple formulation. At least X% of Y will do Z, where Y is your target market and Z is what you expect the target market to do with your idea. So to illustrate the examples, my students came up with this concept, super premium sushi. So the idea is sushi that costs twice as much as the regular packaged sushi, but it's very fresh. It has a gourmet wasabi sauce and gourmet soy sauce. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, will people actually buy? So we formulated the XYZ hypothesis for second-day sushi as follows. At least 10% of packaged sushi buyers will buy second-day sushi for $16 to $20, so roughly twice the price of regular sushi. So that's our market hypothesis, and we want to know if this hypothesis holds true. Remember, the job of a hypothesis is to be tested. So how do we test it? Well, our initial hypothesis says 10% of packaged sushi buyers. So if we look at the whole world with 7 billion people, 10% is a pretty hefty number, right? 700 million people. So what we need to do is hypozoom up and keep hypozooming until we are at a place where we can conduct an experiment. So let me explain. You have probably seen those science videos where they show the planet Earth from space, and then they zoom in to a particular continent, then to a particular country, then to a particular city. And, maybe at the very end of zooming so far, there's a little kid holding an ice cream. So that's what I want you to do mentally with your idea. I know that you want to conquer the world, but for the first test, let's try to bring it here to where we are. So I want you to hypozoom to where you are. So we're going to start from planet Earth, right? We zoom in. First step, we zoom in to California. California has about 40 million people, so that's still a lot of people to do an experiment. So let's zoom in further. We zoom in to Silicon Valley, about 3 million people in Silicon Valley. Let's zoom in more. Where are we? We are in Mountain View, which has about 80,000 people, still a pretty big number. So we keep zooming in, and eventually, in this example, we zoom in to a place in Mountain View, a store called Ninja Market, which happens to sell packaged sushi. And this store serves about, let's say, 500 people per day. It's a real store. I do not know their actual specifics, but I know a few hundred people go there each day. And let's have a big display, a nice collection of packaged sushi always on display. And we want to test, let's say they sell 200 boxes of sushis per day. So we've hypozoomed from the entire world of potential sushi eaters to a place within a couple of miles of where we are now. So we can actually run our test now. So we can test our big hypothesis here. So as you remember, the XYZ hypothesis, the one that includes the whole world, says that at least 10% of packaged sushi buyers will buy super premium sushi for twice the price of regular sushi. But we've hypozoomed to a baby XYZ hypothesis that says at least 10% of Ninja Market packaged sushi buyers today will pay, let's say, $16 or $18 for our super premium sushi today. So as you've seen, we've taken a very, very big hypothesis to something that we can test. We can test it today using the techniques that I describe in the book, essentially prototyping. Now, this is important because you have the big hypothesis, the big XYZ, which is very hard to test. But here's the beauty of hypothesis. And remember, hypotheses exist to be tested. So we need to test them, but it's very hard to test a big hypothesis. That's why we hypozoom to a testable one. And the idea is that if it is true that 10% of all of the world packaged sushi buyers would happily pay $20 for a super premium sushi, then it must be true that at least a similar amount, a similar percentage of packaged sushi buyers at Ninja Sushi in Mountain View will also buy super premium sushi. It's right, it's to be expected. If this is true, this has to be true, and vice versa. Now, of course, let's assume we do the experiment and we find out that nobody buys it. Do we stop then? No, maybe we want to do a few more experiments, but it doesn't look good for our XYZ hypothesis, right? If our hypothesis is true, how come we cannot get anybody to actually buy the second day sushi? If instead of 10%, we sell 20%, then we say, well, yes, we have an idea. The idea may be the right it. And of course, as I describe in the book, you never stop at one experiment. You conduct several experiments, depending on what their results are. It could be 3, 4, 5, maybe even as many as 10 experiments to make sure that your idea is validated. But here's the trick, or not the trick, here's the beauty of it, is that each of these experiments can be run very, very quickly, very, very cheaply, and each of these experiments doesn't give you any abstract data or projection. It gives you your own data. Remember from a previous video, Yoda, your own data. It tells you whether people will want specifically your idea. And if you do an XYZ hypothesis, you will have a very easily testable idea. So remember, with XYZ hypothesis, the big one, you think global. I want you to think global. I want you to think that your idea will conquer the world and it will be incredibly successful. But at the same time, I want you to test locally. Why? Well, because it's very efficient. It's quick. It's the most expedient thing that you could do, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, you cannot test the big market. So you want to test locally, which gives you the following advantage. First of all, time to Yoda. By simplifying your test and testing locally by hypozooming, you can get to your own data in a matter of days or hours. Usually ask my students, can you get it in a few hours? You reduce your distance to Yoda. If I'm in Mountain View and there are people that eat sushi in Mountain View, why would I go outside? Try to test local. And finally, dollars to data, because if you test on a small scale and you test locally, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get data that actually makes sense. So remember the XYZ hypothesis, do it, think global, test local. So in the next video, I'm going to show you, well, now that we have the baby XYZ hypothesis, how are we going to get our data, how we're going to validate it. But in the meantime, I want you to think, I want you to look at this question. How would you test the XYZ hypothesis for super premium sushi? And I'll make it easy for you. I will give you 24 hours and $200. So assume you have 24 hours and $200 to get Yoda, to get data that 10% of people who buy packaged sushi will actually pay twice as much for super premium fresh sushi with fresh, real wasabi. Now, of course, if you've read my book, you probably have a leg up on the competition. And I hope that if you like these videos, you really should consider buying my book, because it will give you an unfair advantage against failure. It's packed of powerful techniques, a lot of real world example. It's very, very, very practical. And, for less than $20 at Amazon, how could you go wrong? I guarantee it will save you many, many times, hundreds, thousands of times its cost if you have an idea and you're planning to execute it. So do not execute on your idea. Do not build your it until you make sure that it's the right it. Now, if you like these videos, I hope you come back to make sure you don't miss them. Please subscribe to my channel. That will give me enough motivation to come back and create more videos and help you succeed and make sure that you're building the right it before you build it right. So with that, that's it for today. Make sure you try to do the exercise. How would you validate the XYZ hypothesis for super premium sushi? And I will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.